Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spar and Brawl with Kam versus Sam. I'm one half of your hosting duo. My name is Kam, and I'm joined by my training partner, sparring partner, Sam Danishvar. As many of you might know by now, Spar and Brawl is a weekly show where we look at some news stories from around the world from this week, which either didn't maybe get too much coverage or that we found interesting for one reason or another. So, Sam, how's it going? How are you doing this week?
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. And yeah, it's good. It was relatively quiet compared to last couple of weeks because we didn't have I guess convention going on, and the news from the political election has died down a bit. But yeah, it was good. It was good, catching up on some old news, I guess.
Yeah, actually,
How was your?
Yeah, actually talking about the elections and everything, it reminded me. I was thinking that maybe a week or two before the election, we should make, if you're down, we should make official predictions of who we think is gonna win and also give reasons though.
Sure, sure. That's a good idea. We can even go state by state. We can do a state by state one and maybe put some money on the line. We'll see.
That's what honestly, aren't these polls about like general, attitude in the US towards either one of the presidents absolutely pointless in the US system?
I don't. I mean, depends on the size of the poll and everything. But I think maybe the ones that are about how enthusiastic are they about going out to vote, those ones sometimes seem to be quite useful. Like they show how well a campaign is being run or how well the base is being served. But I largely agree with you. Most of them I think are pretty useless, and the sample size is too small or not diverse enough. So yeah, pretty
Yeah, and I mean,
useless.
in the States, it just comes down to winning a specific state. I mean, that's just so important and getting those delegates. So that's why I find
Yeah.
the national ones to be. But anyway, we'll save that for later. So that's going to be fun. And then for today, we have a bunch of stories, including developments between Turkey and Greece, Saudi Arabia firing its commander. I'm going to cover a study on racism that came out, which I found to be quite interesting. We have BBC story about the new head of BBC, which is a Tory now, so a right-wing conservative. And we are going to, Sam has also another story on Facebook and Australia. Anything else, Sam? We have a hot take about the aviation industry. I think it's wrongly maligned. Sam has a fun story about, and that features Nancy Pelosi. Anything else?
I think that's about it. That's about covers all our news this week.
Okay, so
Um,
why don't you get us started with the first story for this week, our quote unquote in-depth story. So this is going to be the story that we're going to spend the most amount of time on. Oh, and uh, just a few housekeeping rules forgot to mention. Please subscribe and like the video if you like the content. And of course, what else? Oh, and we timestamp every different story that we cover in the description box below. So you can go check out what's there and go to the section that you're most interested in. And we also include all of the news stories and any other resources that we mentioned in the description box below. So you can find all of the links there. And yes, please subscribe and like and share the video if you liked it.
Definitely. So, for our in-depth story this week, I got a story that was actually updated as I was preparing for it. Let me just give you the general outlook first, and then I'll go into the details. So, about there has been basically a flare-up between Greece and Turkey over their border, their maritime border in the Aegean Sea. That's been an issue for a very long time, but that it has flared up to, it's becoming a significant political issue now. It's becoming potentially, some people even say, a hot war might come out of it, but I personally doubt that at this point. But so the issue is that basically about a month ago, Turkey sent a ship for surveying the Mediterranean Sea for gas, accompanied with a warship off the coast of Turkey, obviously, and off the coast of islands that belong to Greece. Very, very small islands, closer to Turkey than to Greece, technically, but officially part of Greece. And Greece is officially backed up by international law. According to international law, I believe it's 12 kilometers. I'm not sure, but a certain amount off of your land is your sovereign. Is you can control that part of the sea. That's your territorial water, so to speak. But Turkey is one of the few countries that's not signed up to the international treaty about the laws of the sea. Turkey is not signed up to that law, so they're not even officially part of it. So we can't even say they're breaking international law. They're just not subscribed to it. And basically, the fact that now they are, according to certain researchers and people who've been surveying the waters, there is potentially as much gas in the Mediterranean Sea as there is in the, I think, North Sea, where Norway explores gas. So now the competition over the gas in the Mediterranean Sea is heating up, and this issue has been going on for the last year or so. But it connects to the historical conflict between Greece and Turkey, and Cyprus, if Cyprus should be viewed as an independent entity. So if you want, you can ask me questions and I can go into further details.
Yeah, so right now you just mentioned historical kind of conflict between Turkey and Greece. What were you referring to?
So following the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, Greece gained independence. There was population transfer, but Cyprus remained a bit of a contagious issue because first it was a British mandate, and then there was a government which both Turkey and Greece recognized as official government. Suddenly, in 1970s, there was a coup by sort of Greek nationalists. They call themselves Cypriot nationalists, but they were definitely more pro-Greece than pro-Turkey. So Turkey invades and starts basically taking over. This leads to, at this point, by the way, back in 70s, US was far more active in international issues. So US basically intervenes and stops Turkey from basically taking over the whole island. And they partition the island into two segments: the Northern Cyprus, which is technically it's called, I think, Republic of Northern Cyprus, and it's a separate entity from the Turkish government technically, but it's only recognized by Turkey, nobody else. I don't think any other nation recognizes them. And in the south, you have the Greek Republic, the southern, it's the Cyprus Republic, which is more Greek friendly. And they are recognized by everybody. They are part of EU. And the problem is twofold here, because you have Turkey, which is part of NATO, but is not part of EU, right? And then you have Greece, which is part of NATO and EU. And then you have the Cyprus, Southern Cyprus, which is part of EU, but it's not part of NATO. So the whole thing is a bit of a mess. And the issue over Cyprus has always been a very contagious issue between Greece and Turkey. So that aside, besides that, the issue of islands as a whole is a bit crazy, because if international law is actually accepted in this case, that would basically mean the Aegean Sea, as one analyst put it, is basically a Greek lake, because because there are all these tiny, tiny islands, and if you apply the international law, it basically becomes all territorial water of Greece, which Turkey argues is very unfair. This is the basically historical basis for the conflict. But the fact that gas was found in that area, or is thought to be viable in that area, in recent years has basically led to two blocks of power emerging. You had about a year ago, you had a forum formed, which some people called OPEC for the Mediterranean. And this forum was Greece, Jordan, Israel, even Palestine, and Egypt, maybe one other country too. And these countries, they formed an alliance to explore for gas in the Mediterranean Sea with the help of American companies and European companies. Total, I think, was part of it. So you had that, but Turkey was intentionally left out of that deal because of its problems with Greece. So Turkey felt left out. So what Turkey did, Turkey started making its own deal with the UN-backed government in Libya, because Libya also has a huge coast of the Mediterranean. So they started basically making their deals with Tripoli. And that's why basically the main reason why Turkey has been such a strong supporter of the UN-backed regime in Libya against the General Haftar's government. So Turkey got closer to Libya. Then Greece got very angry about that. So Greece made a deal with Egypt, basically demarcating the maritime. They basically settled all their maritime border disputes. So Greece is teaming up with Egypt. At the same time, France surprisingly came out very strongly in favor of Greece. The EU, or just France, I'm not sure, they are even doing joint military exercises with Greece, and they said that they're gonna defend Greece in all its for all its territorial integrity and all the usual stuff, which is not as surprising, probably one thought, because France has been clashing with Turkey in Lebanon. France has been clashing with Turkey in Libya. And it seems that this is gonna become a bigger and bigger conflict. The latest update to the conflict was that yesterday, let me read so I don't make a mistake. Yesterday, General, I'm probably gonna butcher, by the way, this name because it's a Scandinavian name, so I apologize. General Jens Stoltenberg said that Greece and Turkey, both members of the Western Alliance, had begun technical talks, but they had yet to agree on a deal to avoid accidental clashes in the East Mediterranean. Meanwhile, Turkey on Friday, same day, accused Greece of shunning the dialogue and lying by denying it signed up to NATO-brokered talks. So it was, for one moment, we had a supposedly positive news that there is going to be talks, but then a few hours later, Turkey's foreign minister denied it. And then I watched the interview a couple of hours ago with Turkish foreign minister, in which, at least rhetorically, Turkey was saying that they want to have talks, they want to have dialogue, and Greece that is, not playing ball, and they very much so. They put the blame on France and EU a lot, which has always been a policy of Turkey. They always refer to Greece as a spoiled child of Europe that gets whatever it wants. But they seem to be up for talks. Greece also says it's up for talks, but it says it's going to do it under threats. And yeah, we're going to see how the situation evolves, because this time around USA is not that, they're not uh, active in international policy right now, especially until the election. I don't think they're gonna become even, they're gonna even reduce probably their activity rather than increase it. So God knows what's gonna happen.
Yeah, this really seems to be just an issue in the European media. And I mean, I saw a little bit about it in Anadolu, which is the Turkish media. I haven't seen anything in the US media or any attention being given by the newspapers or.
Well, I mean, Trump did apparently contact the Turkish leaders and Greek leaders and advised caution and, advised against any escalation of tensions, but that's nothing compared to, let me read this. In 1974, when Greece and Turkey were on the cusp of war over Cyprus, it wasn't NATO as such which prevented hostilities, the involvement of its most powerful member, the United States of America. Uh, I mean, in a way, you could argue NATO was created by US to avoid or such conflicts, or to keep such conflicts within the family against Russia. And this is going to be a big challenge to NATO, because obviously Turkey is one of its biggest, it has the second biggest army in NATO. And at the same time, Greece is a cornerstone of EU and all that. So it's quite interesting. And the whole issue of gas is massive for European Union, because if they can, in 10 years, they actually manage to get gas off Iranian, they are basically independent from Russia, from Russia. So that's a that's very big for them. It's very helpful to them.
Yeah, I think that's what's really making it interesting. Actually, before talking about the larger picture, there was just something you said earlier on about you made some kind of distinction about Turkey not breaking international law but not following it, or you said something along those lines, no?
Well, yeah, basically there is a convention, I think from 1980s. There is a UN convention. I think every nation except United States, which is very typical, and Turkey and one other nation, I think, they are not signed. They haven't signed this treaty. They don't recognize that law, that UN law. Basically, they don't recognize, but it is recognized by the vast majority of
I
states.
see.
So it's kind of like, the nuclear organization, IAEA. Like, if you're not part of it, you can't break its rules. I think it cut off for a moment.
Yeah, it cut off at if you're not part of it, you can't break its rules.
You can't break its rules. Yeah, exactly.
I see. I see.
Uh,
So internet, it's kind of reminding me of a few things, but pretty much internationally, that nobody's really backing Turkey right now, right? Because like EU is taking the side of Greece.
No, I mean, I guess Libya, the internationally recognized government of Libya, is obviously backing Turkey, but US is surprised. I mean, to be honest, it seems US has. It's not that US is supporting Turkey, but it's not coming against Turkey as much as they expected it. Like, it's not coming in favor of coming out in favor of Greece very strongly. They just seem to not give it. So that seems to be the thing.
And
But
I guess that makes quite a lot of sense that they don't care about it as much because just as you mentioned, if Greece gets access to these gas reserves and also falls in the hand of the EU, that means they can be less reliant. I think they rely a lot on gas from Russia, right? Which I assume they don't like doing that.
sure, Europeans don't love doing that, but at the same time, US doesn't want them to do, like, nobody wants Europe to become gas independence, right? Everybody wants. So America is not too happy about Europe becoming gas independent either. And one analyst, I think it was on DW or something, he was arguing that because U.S. Had operations with Turkey in northern Syria and all that, they don't want to, they don't want to put. And Turkey always plays Russia and America against each other. Right now, Turkey just they try to demote their basically most senior Navy officer, their rear admiral. He wouldn't accept demotion. He resigned. And generally speaking, the military of Turkey is very very secular, and quite a lot of them pro-Russia and pro-China. So, America is a bit worried about, the fact that they might move towards Russia quite strongly. So, it's nobody's, so far from what I know, nobody's supporting his claim. But very interestingly, just about a week or 2 weeks ago, Turkey announced they found major gas reserves in the Black Sea as well. And that could, in 7 or 8 years, basically, that they could exploit that as well, which put probably in direct competition with the Russia, Black Sea.
Yeah, and just finding all these all these gas or energy oil reserves, it reminds me of our conversation last week where we said there's probably so much more oil and gas reserves that are just simply not explored. So, I mean, as long as we want to go after these kind of energy resources, it seems like they're available in abundance. But so the Libya thing is interesting, right? So for those, so many people might not know, there's a UN, I guess EU, US also backed government in Libya, but they've been under attack by pretty much the army of General Haftar. I think this has been going on for at least 2 to 3 years. I think they managed to break into Tripoli, but they've been kicked out of Tripoli again. Haftar,
There was there was a siege of Tripoli, which some argue with the help of Turkey, they managed to fend off Haftar's forces, basically. And Haftar is backed by UAE and France, which is, that's, by the way, an angle we should talk about, the French and Turkey angle and the Turkish internal politics. But in Libya's term, UAE, France, and America, basically, they backed. General Haftar himself is a fascinating figure, former general for Muammar Gaddafi. And then Gaddafi, when he's held, he's taken hostage, basically, by Gaddafi's enemies, and Gaddafi basically abandons him, and just great, like loving dictator. And then after defects to US later on, and he literally, I think his house was next to CIA's headquarters, like Langley. He lived like next to CIA, and now he's gone to take over the country. So
yeah.
he has very strong connection with the US.
So that's that. So so Turkey probably wants to secure the UN-backed government, and that way it can secure its right to these gas reserves that it's found. So I think they've even sent actual troops on the ground, a few thousand, to Libya, which hasn't been done by many countries yet.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it is. I mean, it hasn't been done. But if you look at it from the Turkish perspective, all these countries were once Ottoman nations, or at least Sunni. They are still Sunni countries, so they don't see that. Don't see it very odd or very strange. That's what I meant from the internal Turkish perspective. One of the major reasons they say Erdogan is pursuing these policies, besides the obvious economic benefits of gas, is it's very very popular with the population. All of these movements so far, even their incursion into Syria, which largely failed, was very popular with the large segments of the population.
Yeah. So I mean, mentioned Syria, there was also a report that they were even sending Syrian refugees to fight in Libya on behalf of Turkey. But before getting to the France thing, it just making me think that Turkey's relationship with EU, I mean, it hasn't been good over a few issues, right? I mean, maybe 10, 15 years ago, they were supposed to join the European Union. That didn't happen. And then there was the whole refugee crisis, and Turkey were supposed to keep as many Syrian refugees as possible in Turkey and in return get large sums of money. And I think that deal is breaking, falling apart. But so, do you want to talk a little bit more about France and why France seems to have its own agenda that's more specific, I want to say, than the EU? Does that make sense? Or
Sure, yeah. I mean, about the EU thing, first of all, I think that deal broke down. The 2016 deal is broken down. They're just allowing the immigrants to pass through. And I mean, about 10 years ago, it became clear to Turkey that they are not going to be allowed to join the EU. And even if they do join the EU, they're not going to have half of the benefits that, for example, the French farmers had or the German industrialists had, So they are basically, they have moved significantly to a more national, just general population as well as the political class are much more like thinking that they should basically go the nationalistic route. And that's the EU thing. And the French thing, the Turkish foreign minister actually accused France of having colonial ambitions in the Middle East, and he did connect the Greece gas issue to the Lebanese issue because Beirut explosion, which was one of the first stories we covered, following the Beirut explosion, there was a sort of a competition between Turkey and France on who's gonna rebuild the port. Turkey offered its willingness to rebuild the port, but France is doing this whole we're gonna have a summit and offer a comprehensive package of package of relief, but if there is reform that we approve of, whatever that is. And but this is not just in Lebanon. You see that in Lebanon. You see the issue in General Haftar is very close to France, and France is very upset with Turkey's actions in Libya. They have accused them of supporting terrorism, looting, breaking consensus, all of that. So that's in Libya as well.
also they're backing. This is despite the fact that technically speaking, Turkey is backing the UN recognized side of the
Yeah, sure. Yes, yeah. Technically. And yeah, to be honest, I should look more into France's activities in Africa, because some analysts were saying right now actually France is somewhat overstretched. So probably I'm guessing that France is stepping up its efforts, and it's generally, it seems to be the policy of Macron that he's seeing an opportunity with American sort of retreat from international scene. He's trying to he sees a place for a international statement to come in and fill in that vacuum, and he sees that chance for a good chance for France. But I mean, he seems to be suffering heavily internally. I don't know how sustainable he's long term, and I don't know how, like, he thinks he comes off as this international leader who everybody loves and stuff. Man, I don't know. I think he comes off a bit as an arrogant imperialist, as the Turkish foreign minister put it. But there was another. Turkey had an issue with France, but it hasn't. I'll mention it. چی شد؟
Your screen froze. Okay,
Alright.
I'm back.
Maritime
So
critical
you were
mass.
just talking. Oh, well, yeah, no, you were just talking about. You were just saying how France might be overstretching itself, and Macron is not necessarily. He thinks he's very popular international. I mean, I think in the media and right now, at best, he's kind of neutral. And
Yeah, most people are, to be honest, they don't care. But I do think, no, exactly. He's a typical media darling, as in like Tony Blair type figure. That is, he's very refined.
he didn't
He
exceed. I
can
mean, he was
talk.
really popular before, though. He hasn't become even within the media, within that media bubble. I think he hasn't become like more and more and more, liked by
No,
the media. I think maybe in the beginning that was maybe the most popular he was even within the media. I think.
I think his peak was when he met with Trump and they did a handshake, and he was, I don't know, he had a tough handshake or something. That the media lost it. Like, loved him at that point.
What was that about? That oh, because I think Trump was doing this thing where he would go shake
Yeah,
people's hands and pull
push.
doors and stuff, and he pulled Trump or something. Wow, 50 years ask Macron was the wisest, best political move that you did. Let me tell you guys about that handshake.
I pulled instead of push. I pulled.
With world-class athletes was carried to reach that level. But yeah, and then you were talking about France and being overstretched in Africa. I've been wanting to cover, I don't even know how much France relates to what's going on in Mali right now. But in any case, I think France has been involved as an individual country, like separate from the UN, separate from the EU in West Africa. And this has been going on for about a decade. And it even goes back to François Hollande, the previous president, who where was it that he went and he fought under the name of fighting jihadists and
I
terrorism?
think Mali, wasn't it? I think there was an oil, or Nigeria. There was an
I think
oil
it's
issue where terrorists took.
not oil. They say because France is very much reliant on nuclear energy. They say they try to um, secure the resources for nuclear energy in Mali and West Africa. So I don't think it's oil. I think it's more for nuclear power.
I'll check
But I'm not
it.
sure.
But yeah, I follow.
Yeah, I'm not.
And uh, I mean, let's not forget that France was the leading Western or European country in when the Libyan civil war happened, and they were the biggest pushers for Gaddafi's removal, which is
100%.
really just shows you how fickle, politicians and just international politics is, because they were the close to Gaddafi. They had parties together, and just like and they were the ones pushing for him to be removed by the Americans more than others.
Yeah, I think the whole Libya war is really a good all-encompassing story for people to kind of understand different kinds of hypocrisies that go on, different alliances that seem to be so strong between Western countries and a Middle Eastern country or North African country just a few decades ago, and how they can change so quickly, and the way that the media can get behind. I mean, the way that they got behind that Libyan war, I think, was one of the last ones. I remember the way that CNN was covering literally every single of these pickup trucks with Libyan rebels going around trying to, kill Gaddafi, and the way they celebrated and the killing of Gaddafi. I mean, I don't care for Gaddafi much, but the way they made it look like. And then, of course, there's the famous Hillary Clinton phrase where she says, "We came and we saw and we conquered," referring to, the takeover of Libya and the killing of Gaddafi.
Yeah, and followed with a very somewhat insidious laughter. Like, we saw, we came, we saw, we conquered. Haha. Anyway, but
And
no, yeah, I agree. If somebody has any delusions about international law or liberal value system or something, they just need to study Libyan history, recent history especially, to find out how, yeah, values are how related are values to actions. Really, none at all.
No,
But
this is a super interesting story on pretty much on energy and conflict within that area of the trying to secure energy sources within that area of the world.
yeah, to be honest, it might be led me to actually questions about. I mean, what we're seeing is basically US pulling back and increased competition between biggest states. In this case, you have France sort of representing a coalition of European states and Turkey. So I wonder if this is the type of thing we're going to see more and more everywhere. Like suddenly, we are seeing the similar thing with the Sea of China or Sea of Japan, whichever,
Mhm.
because that's the same issue. Japan and China have similar issues. So we'll see with US. It would be interesting to see if Biden will continue the trend. I mean, in my view, Obama was pretty much, and Trump is pretty much following Obama's policy, in my view. So I think the trend will continue and we'll see more of these, but who knows, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, and I just heard something interesting this week that is kind of unrelated to this story, but I thought it to be quite accurate and interesting. So someone, you remember the whole Benghazi saga
Oh,
that's related to, that's of course, it's a city in Libya, and what kind of, they made such a big deal out of this, Republicans, right? And someone compared the whole Russia Gate, the whole story about the Russia Gate and Russia to Benghazi, and they were like, these two are just similarly bullshit stories. And I thought that was such a good comparison of two, I mean, minor stories that were blown
no,
in.
no, wait. I would say I personally think Russiagate is far, far worse because at least in Benghazi, you could argue there was a security issue and you could argue they lied at first for no reason. They blamed the tape of some video of Muslims. I don't like, they did lie at first, or at least they talked out of their asses, but with Russiagate there was nothing. Like they did 3 years of like deep research and they still come up with nothing and they still insist they are right. It's just madness. I really don't understand this.
Yeah, I
It's
think
the
exactly. They're like,
Yeah.
I think you can go either way with some like minor bullshit differences between the two of them that make both stories seem even more ridiculous than they are. Exactly. Or, I mean, I don't even know who's been more obsessed over this, but the Republicans also were so obsessed over this Benghazi
Yeah.
story. It was
Oh no, look, the way Republicans utilized it as in a sort of a conspiracy theory that Hillary may be like Hillary's in alliance with some Muslim extremists trying to take down the American empire. I mean that's bullshit. But it was complete. I mean the history. I mean everything these days seems to be just hysteria, and I agree. Those were some of the very similar examples. And to be honest, I do think I mean, I haven't heard it said openly, but I do think Democrats basically looked at Republicans and they saw these type of things and they saw that it kind of seems to work. They have the Senate, they have most of the state legislatures, they have half of the Congress. So I think they did sort of consciously adopt this hysterical way of basically communicating.
Yeah. And if you're not genuine, you don't have too many genuine points of attacks anyway. So you have to resort to bullshit kind of stories like this. So, but yeah, so to summarize, this is really a story that we're going to have to keep on following, right? Because as you mentioned, it's Friday and there were the developments saying that, okay, now Greece and Turkey are talking, but Turkey's
Then
coming.
the Turkey denied. Yeah. I mean, I have a very I don't think we're gonna see a hot war because of they are both NATO members and Greece is backed by EU and US and Turkey is a very powerful nation. Uh, but it's gonna lead to much increased tensions with EU, and but the major issue that I think we should keep our eye on is the gas. That's the big deal. Everything is, everything else is just the side dish and all that. So hopefully it won't develop to a hot war, and I doubt it, but you never know.
So now we're going to move to next segment of our show. It's called Quick Takes, and we're just going to go at a much faster pace over a few news stories from this week. So the first one is that the Saudi Arabia has removed its commander who was in charge in Yemen, and the official justification given by the Saudis are corruption charges. So he's been removed. His son who was the governor of a Saudi state, has been removed, and a couple of other individuals, which I don't know if they're family members or if they were part of the army, but they were part of the whole, the 4 or 5 of them were removed at the same time. I think those are pretty much the details of this story. Are there any specific details, Sam, that you'd like to add?
Not specifically about the removal of this general, but it seems to be part of wider development in the Yemeni situation. Following the recent break between UAE and Saudi on the war, now UAE is supporting southern separatists.
Sorry, let me just give a quick overview of the Yemen civil war.
Sure, of course.
So as many of you are aware, Yemen has had a civil war going on between the Houthi rebels, which are quote unquote supported by Iran, and the official, Yemeni government. They're recognized, I think, by the UN, and they're backed by the Saudis and UAE. So as mentioned, this war has been going on since 2015. This civil war, it has led to over 100,000 deaths, including 12,000 civilians. These are very, I think, conservative estimates. And as well as the death of 85,000 people in addition due to famine. And this is because out of a country the UN has been calling Yemen for at least 5 years the worst humanitarian crisis out there. So they've been labeled as the worst humanitarian crisis, despite the fact that the Syrian civil war was also going on at the same time. So out of a population of 28 million, according to the UN, these are the latest figures, over 24 million people need humanitarian assistance. 3.6 million people have been internally displaced. So within Yemen, they have been forced to leave their homes, move to other cities, move to internal displacement refugee camps. And 20 million out of the 28 million are food insecure as well. And Yemen has been struggling with a cholera outbreak this whole time, which has killed an additional 2,500 people. So I'm not sure if it falls within those that died of famine, I guess not. But 2,500 have been killed due to the cholera outbreak. And I'll just have also small stats on COVID-19. So apparently there have been, as of 31st of July, so these numbers are from a month ago, there are apparently only 1,700 confirmed cases, which you can say is not so bad, but this has resulted in 494 deaths. So pretty much 1 out of 3 Yemenis who got coronavirus, unfortunately, passed away due to the virus. But yeah, that was just a quick overview of the humanitarian situation. I think Sam will now get into a bit about the political situation and the recent developments there too.
Just a quick correction. UAE doesn't back the internationally recognized government anymore. They back the separatists since about 6 months ago or something. And the southern separatists, not the Houthis. And
so there are 3 stakeholders, quote unquote, now in Yemen, right?
At least, it's difficult to separate between the southern separatists and Al Qaeda, because Al Qaeda is also there, and UAE does not, at least officially, does not support Al Qaeda, but they do support southern separatists, which are very similar and closely aligned in some cases with Al Qaeda. And they have taken over a strategic island off the coast of Yemen, UAE forces. And a day ago, 2 months ago, they dismissed the governor, which was put there by that island was before controlled by the Saudi-backed government, the official UN unrecognized government, Al-Hadi's government. So 2 months ago, they dismissed him, and they just put on their own governor, and then local tribal leaders uh, accuse them. This is allegation, not confirmed, that UAE is allowing Israel to come to this island. It's a very beautiful island with natural beauties, and it's in a strategic position. So that's, to be honest, that's just the allegation at this point, and it's been a day, so I don't know that quickly after one day of becoming governor. I don't know how they could bring the Israelis that fast. But yeah, it's I mean, I think, to be honest, the removal of I was looking into that news, the removal of the general. I mean, it seems to be partially like Ben Salman's general strategy, that whenever he is not popular at home, he says corruption and removes a couple of people. And then, but I've heard that he is still popular with the young because of his anti-corruption policies. I don't know if it's still gonna work. And to be honest, in general, I think Saudis are slowly reducing their involvement in Yemen, because I think the southern separatists are far more successful than Hadi's government. And Yemen was, for a very long time, Yemen is like the south is very sunny, and mountains in the north are very Shia, a very unique sect of Shia. So it does kind of make sense for it to go that way anyway. So yeah, I think it may be part of that development, but maybe not, because it's such a secretive state. Who knows?
Yeah. But I mean, definitely seems like the civil war there has either reached a stalemate, or you can even say, I mean, I don't think the Houthis are losing. They're not gaining, but they're not losing, right? They still have control of Sana'a. And now that there is this there's, the UAE and Saudi aren't necessarily aligned 100% in Yemen. There doesn't seem to be much for the Saudis there except wasting resources and killing people.
Yeah, I mean, the thing it's I mean, there are still issues like the prestige issue, obviously, because I mean, I don't personally think Houthis are Iranian proxies, but they did become far closer to Iran during this period. It did become a sort of a, they did form in blocks, Iran and Houthis. So it's a bit of a prestige issue for Saudis. It's a bit of a security issue to have an Iranian allied group right at your border. It's a security issue. But I just, at this point, I don't think Saudi can afford the cost anymore, because they had issues with the what do you call it? The public IP of their Aramco, their oil company. That didn't go as well as they wanted, and the whole Corona thing, oil prices. So they have serious financial issues as well. So I don't think. I mean, it definitely did not worth it was not worth it ever because of the human cost. But just putting that aside, sadly, yeah, I think at this point it's not even politically justified to continue this war.
Yeah. So, I mean, now they're going to have to turn to their PR machine and pretty much spin this the best way possible over the next coming years.
That's what they've been doing for the last 4 years, really. So yeah, they're gonna continue that, and probably reduce their involvement. That's my guess, but who knows?
Yep. That makes sense. Okay. So, what else do you have for us today?
Well, there were a couple of interesting news stories, sort of about media. First of all, the new BBC Director General started his post, and let me. The BBC Director General Tim Davie. Tim Davie, pretty much to be honest, I can't believe that he's been made Director General. He has a history in BBC. I think he was the head of political programming in BBC before he left to lead the campaign, to lead the media campaign for probably the least, like one of the least successful politicians ever, Theresa May. So I don't know how, like, just after that disastrous job you've done for her, how, although she was such an awful candidate, I don't know if anybody could have helped her. But yeah, Tim Davie is starting as the Director General of the BBC, and the first signs are not good at all because, well, in my view at least, he's been talking a lot about, there is too much political bias in the BBC, which is basically code for BBC's too left wing. And he's been signaling he's gonna bring in more right wing comedy, anyway, and he's gonna try to like possibly cut some left wing comedies like the MASH Report, maybe under threat. Mock the Week, which is a hugely popular program in the UK, that might be. First of all, those programs are not left wing. I mean, they're not. They're basically social democrat, centrist type, And secondly, right wing comedy. Have you heard of any right wing comedians? I, to be honest, maybe one or two that are not political. They're just normal, just everyday comedians. But just right wing comedy, really?
I mean, what does that even mean? I mean, that could mean two things. One is that, I don't know, you allow more like racist or homophobic jokes and content.
No.
Or,
No, to be
or I mean, what? The people look more conservative in the shows? Or, I mean, what does that mean?
to be honest, they mean more people who are more supportive of Tories and possibly more supportive of privatization and austerity measures and nationalistic, not maybe racist, sometimes maybe, but you never know. So that's, but this is not I mean, BBC has been under attack for many years. For its budget's always been cut, and it's always been criticized for being too left-wing, which it isn't at all. It's just funny. The British broadcasting company is too left-wing. Anyway, but it's not a good sign for the next 5-6 years at least.
Yeah. I think my comment kind of showed my own left-wing bias, but I think, in all honesty, there's no such thing as left and right-wing, especially like TV shows and all that. I mean, it borderline makes no sense, really. There's no such thing as implementing that. At least when it comes to entertainment. I mean, your news and stuff, of course, but is he in charge of what, BBC News, or even everything that falls under the BBC umbrella?
Look, to be honest, I don't exactly know the specifics of the chain of command in BBC, but Director General is usually regarded as the editor at chief or some, chief editor. Like the basically he has oversee over content, as far as I know, of everything, basically. I assume because BBC has all these, it's a large bureaucracy. I assume he may, like, there may be, obviously his authority is delegated in some areas. And to be honest, I've always, like, the board has a lot of power, and BBC Ward is a separate entity sometimes. So I don't know the exact chain of command, but I'm sure he will have a significant impact in the direction over the course of the next 5 and maybe more years.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so if he happens to have also control over the entertainment side of it, I just had a good idea, an easy one. He just needs to revive Top Gear with the old cast, with Jeremy Clarkson. That I think of conservative show. That would be a conservative show. It's about car. It's about oil. It's about men. They make
I,
jokes. Jeremy Clarkson is known for making jokes that fall under, they can be racist or homophobic. I can't remember any
I,
specific ones, but he's been accused of this.
no, yeah, one of the reason why the Top Gear, he was basically kicked out of Top Gear, Clarkson, was because he got into a physical fight with a producer, and apparently punched him or something. But to be honest, I don't think, first of all, BBC can afford him anymore. I think Amazon is just the deal is a much bigger deal. Like, that's one of the ways BBC is always, that's one of the ways recently Tories managed to weaken BBC. BBC is forced to publish all all its salaries it pays to major stars, something that private companies are not. So, so it created hiring people like Clarkson or famous people is very hard for BBC, because as soon as he hires them with big salaries, then there is a backlash from the other side that, oh, we are like, schools don't have enough funding, but you're paying 300,000 a year to Clarkson or whatever. So yeah, BBC is just they find it difficult to do whatever. I mean, yeah, from the right wing comedy thing, the only comedian I remember, I saw a few comedians who were like pro Brexit on a few shows, but even they didn't seem like right wing. They seemed more like socialist, like, this is gonna have bad connotations, but I don't mean it, but just nationalistic, social nationalist, like, rather than a neoliberal, internationalist, right, typical, like what we think of a right winger. And yeah, I don't think racism is acceptable anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's gonna be, yeah. BBC is in a tough position, very tough position.
That's interesting. And I mean, he's known for making really good, all kinds of content. I mean, joking about Top Gear, back in the day, I used to love it. And I mean, really the production value and everything, it was the only car show that is like that. I'm sure people have seen car shows on TV. They haven't changed for past like 30 years, but their level of production was huge. And now, of course, it's Amazon's continuing. Okay, so let's stay within the media bubble. The next story is from Australia, right?
Yeah, this was quite interesting. Hopefully, we're gonna have a regular segment in our show looking at media coverage of news stories, and this one kind of piqued my interest in that way too. But first, the news itself. Australia, they just, I think, approved a draft or completed a draft of a law that if passed, they will be charging Facebook for news shared on their platform. And well, Facebook was not happy with this at all. So they basically, sorry, let me read this for you. Facebook, this is according to Guardian, and I'll come back to this because this is partially what I'm talking about, the coverage. Facebook threatens to block Australians from sharing news in battle over landmark media. Digital Giant says it will stop users of Facebook and Instagram sharing local and international news if new law proposed by competition watchdog is approved. And by the way, let me clarify something to people you might know this, by the way. In at least within British and Australian system, a watchdog, a commission or whatever, in this case competition watchdog, they propose a draft. This draft gets redrafted. Then this redraft goes to the parliament. Then there it gets again redrafted. Then it gets amendments. Then it changes. So, like, a proposal from a watchdog is like saying Sam had an idea. Basically, that's as far as it goes. The mandatory news code has been backed by all the major media companies, including News Corp Australia, which I believe is owned by Murdoch, Nine Entertainment, and Guardian Australia as a way to offset damage caused by the loss of advertising revenue to Facebook and Google. Uh, but this is Facebook's official announcement. Assuming this draft code becomes law, we will reluctantly stop allowing publishers and people in Australia from sharing local and international news on Facebook and Instagram. The managing director of Facebook Australia and New Zealand, Will Easton, said in a blog post on Tuesday. So basically, they want Facebook and Instagram naturally to pay for every time their news stories are shared. Like if we share news, and the content is by Fox, for example, they should pay Fox for that content. That's the proposal. What's your take on it first before I go into my take?
I mean, I think from Facebook's point of view, I mean, this is ridiculous. Them being charged for content being shared on their platform, and I guess for the media, it just all has to do with money, right? They probably want people in one way or another to end up on their website and read the news there. Although once you click on a link from Facebook, it takes you to your news website, and then there you can get your advertisement money through Google.
This is about content. So I would assume if, for example, you post a video of Fox News on your channel, like a video of their show, I think that's about that. And somebody sees it in Facebook, doesn't go to your website.
But,
Or read.
But for a news article, you have to go to their website.
For a full one, yeah.
Yeah. And this will cover that too.
But remember, I think more than 80% of online traffic is videos, are videos.
Yeah. But yeah, it just seems like I mean, I think there's so many things wrong about Facebook. I mean, this is just a general point. But the way that the things that they're being attacked a lot recently, you know, whether it's the states being blamed the entire election on them, or even, I mean, here it's the media's right. I mean, if they can get to pass something like this and they want, but of course it's for money reasons. It all comes down to money. And I think from Facebook's point of view, it just makes absolutely no sense.
Sure. To be honest, I don't really see the justification for it because I think if Facebook starts creating its own news, right? They should get taxed like a news corporation. They shouldn't be allowed to use the tax loopholes that are currently in place for technology companies, right? But I don't see how is it fair if you have a platform for sharing content that you should pay the content producer. It's not like you forced the content producer to use your platform. There are alternatives, and it's you know yeah.
And you would
basically
have to apply this. I mean, then there's, of course, they're
I
talking
think
about Facebook and Instagram, but then there's Twitter, there's LinkedIn, and there's so many social media outlets out there.
yeah, this seems to be focused on Facebook. I'm trying to find the exact proposal, but I can't. But and my point was, like, to be honest, I am much more concerned about Facebook blocking people from sharing their content. Now they want to not want just like saying this shouldn't be shared. They are allowing anybody to share. Now you're saying they should not only allow everybody, they should pay them as well for like. I don't get. I would, to be honest, be glad if somebody, because overall, that's what I meant by media coverage. Overall, the media coverage articles I read, even there was a former employee, like a high-ranking employee of Facebook, who did the interview. Overall, people seem to have said that Facebook is threatening the companies, they shouldn't have done that. And yeah, it's a good law, but I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, let me read this. This is the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission Chair, Rod Sims, said Facebook's threat, to be honest, it doesn't seem that much of a threat to me. Anyway, threat was ill-timed and misconceived. The draft media bargaining code aims to ensure Australia's news business, including independent community and regional media, can get a seat at the table for fair negotiations with Facebook and Google, Sims said. I mean, I don't see how something that is backed by News Corp, backed by, uh, if somebody can explain it to me, maybe I don't know enough about the, the specific structure of Australian media, but I think technology companies should pay their fair share of taxes. But this one to me seemed like general, like people like to basically shit on Facebook. And there was another example of this a couple of weeks ago with somebody who I generally like, Matt Stoller. He's a left-wing writer, and he said face. I think he argued, if I'm not mistaken, he argued Mark Zuckerberg is personally responsible for the increased violence that is caused because of social media and all that. And yeah, it just seems to me it's become a cottage industry. Let's shit on, Facebook, in me, especially in media like Guardian, Al Jazeera, all these places where they definitely have they have an interest in shitting on Facebook.
Exactly. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, don't get me wrong, and I completely agree with everything you just said. There's a long list of grievances that you can attack Facebook on. But of course, it seems like once again that mainstream forces pick on random, not random, but I mean things that aren't real genuine issues, but it just has to do more with what they're trying to achieve, and they paint it with such colors.
Yeah. I mean, for example, I think you can see the classic example is the algorithm. They say, oh, the Facebook and Twitter algorithm, they encourage conflict because they tend to promote these videos that are have a strong views that are like dissing someone, or like two sides of argument. And this is what all major newspapers, all major like any editor in a any editor in a traditional newspaper or in a news channel or whatever, that's what everybody's been doing forever. This is not something invented by Facebook or Twitter. You try to cover a story that maximizes your audiences, and usually conflict and drama attracts audience. And Facebook did not come about claiming to be an academic source for discussing, deep issues. It's just for family and friends and, that type of thing. So, yeah, I just think it's unjustified attacks on, I genuinely believe things like Facebook, YouTube even, Google, they should become public utilities. They should be recognized like telephone lines, like gas, like water, as base necessities for living. And there should be public controller, at least a public watchdog or something. But I don't think doing some bullshit attack is the way to go about it.
100%. I mean, I think what I find one big issue is that they need to stop allowing him to buy every single big company out there and having everything under one roof. Now, that's a more serious issue that they should be focused on.
Yeah, exactly. Monopoly, like if focus on probably anti, the competition laws and all that, they could probably maybe decentralize Facebook. Or although I would say, I mean, I definitely agree with you there, but I don't want to break up Facebook, so to speak. I rather have one, at least one centralized system, not maybe Facebook, Google at least, just controlled by like like healthcare or like education with some government overwatch.
Yeah.
So everybody definitely has minimum access.
Yep. I largely agree there. I mean, I don't know exactly what should be done, but yeah, once again, the media and everyone have managed to find an issue where there isn't really an issue and avoid every other kind of real issue surrounding it.
Yeah, again, with this big caveat that I may be completely wrong about the Australian thing. If somebody knows about details, as always, the devil is in the details. Maybe I'm missing some, there is a special structure in Australia or something that this law would definitely help communities. Maybe that's something I'm missing. So if anybody can explain that, please.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more nuance to the story, and I'm sure there are more angles to it, but the fact that these media companies are looking after communities, I highly doubt that.
Yeah, it's just News Corp backs the draft code. Fucking yeah, it's just like it's like saying yes, and Satan also approves of this peace plan. Like, oh, thank you. Yeah, that's what we all needed to know.
Yeah, and then you wanted to talk about, or you wanted to mention something quickly about the US elections or something in the US?
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted because it's so many bad news and stuff. There was a sort of a good news thingy. Senator Ed Markey, which was the incumbent senator for uh, Massachusetts, I believe. He was challenged by Joe Kennedy, and when Joe Kennedy challenged him a couple of months ago, he was ahead of him by 10 points in the polls because of the name recognition, because he had been active in the national scene. And soon he got the backing of people like Nancy Pelosi, which was very surprising because she always said you shouldn't challenge the incumbent. But suddenly, you know, she challenged him. Joe Kennedy was basically, even though Ed Markey is not necessarily the most progressive senator, he's very good on green issues, and he's recently, last couple of years, he has allied with AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So it became a symbolic fight between the left and the right of the Democratic Party, and I'm glad to say Ed Markey managed to crush Joe Kennedy, I think, and win. And in his speech, he acknowledged the youth vote, and I think this is very crucial. If left can convince incumbents like Markey that their ideas are the more popular, their ideas are the uh, tactically superior methods for winning over voters, that could be like hugely effective. Because, for example, civil rights, which was probably one of the more profound positive developments in American history, that was uh, that was pushed forward by Johnson, who's, I believe, like the declassified tapes from the era and stuff shows him to be basically a 100% racist, basically. And he pushed forward with civil rights. So I think politicians should be pushed. That's how usually change comes. So I think this is a good signal in that sense. I hope so. Although tomorrow Ed Markey might sell the left out again, as many others have before. So it might be too. Although I must add, left-wing candidates lost in two other elections, sadly, but they did perform well. They were both, I think, first time candidates, so hopefully in future maybe they can make up for it. We'll see.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting what you said about left-wing politicians should realize that a lot of these issues, these so-called left-wing issues, are much more popular than the media would make people think. Because the media use this trick, at least at the national level, and recently they used it with Bernie Sanders. They're like, look, Bernie Sanders lost against Joe Biden, which means that his ideas are not popular. Although if you watch any of if you listen to Kyle Kalinske, if you listen to The Hill, they point out every single time about polls on the issues themselves, not the candidate, and they're far more popular. They're actually popular. Some of them have 70, 80% approval rate, not approval rate, but agreed by the general public, things such as healthcare for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, there must be a reason why Biden and Kamala Harris and many other politicians, Obama even, at least pretend, or they use a language that is tricky language, we support access to Medicare, and then like weaselly politician language, because they know these ideas or these policies are popular at least. So there must be a reason they pretend that. But, yeah.
Well, Biden stopped pretending, though. Biden, he kind of stopped pretending, at least with healthcare.
Yeah, Biden I'm so surprised about his stance on Medicare. He seems to be so hardcore. Like, yeah, he clarified that I'm definitely against this. Like, don't get your hopes up. So yeah, right there. I'm just saying as a general rule, nobody, even Republicans who cut education, uh, healthcare funding, they frame it as a way of, oh, we're going to cut it here because the private money and the independent world, you know what I mean? They frame it in a way that they're not cutting funding, or they're not supporting it. So yeah, I hope more politicians, I hope it becomes reality that these ideas are actually lead to victories, so more people are inclined to follow these policies.
At least those who want to follow them, because of course a lot of them know it, but I mean that's not where they're getting their money from, and they could care less that these issues are more popular. They just want to get their funding and I guess hopefully win. If not, they'll try a different angle, but keep on getting money from corporations.
Yeah, if they yeah, I mean, if these issues become popular enough, I'm hoping those people get kicked out. Although, yeah, it's a big dream at them. Yeah. As I said it, I realized how hopeless it is.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's it for this segment of our show, the quick takes, and please make sure to subscribe and like the video if you like the content so far.
So in this segment, we're gonna look at another study. Like every week, we're gonna propose as a regular segment, each week looking at a scientific study that sheds some truth in this dark, dark world. So Camille, what study do you have for us this week?
Yeah, so the study that kind of caught my attention this week and I found to be interesting, first, it has a cool name. It's called The Color of a Free Ride. So in this study, the researchers look at the impact that racism had in quote unquote discretionary favors in the marketplace, they say. So areas in the marketplace or real life where someone who is in charge of a particular activity kind of can make a decision for themselves on what to do. So it'll become clear right now when I tell you what the study was. So this study was a field experiment that took place in Brisbane, Australia, and just in the social science world, there aren't too many field experiments, but this one's very interesting. But the researchers got 30 participants. They were all university age students, same number of boys and girls pretty much. And their ethnicities some were black, others were white, then there were Asians, and then there were Indians. I apologize, but in the Australian context, I'm not too sure. I'm guessing Indians, they're referring to the native population. So
No. I think no, they're referring to Indians because there is a significant Indian migrants from India.
okay, so they're referring to them. Okay, yeah, I was
Like I've heard most people say Aborigines or Australians. Then nobody calls them like Australian Indian ever. So I don't think that's the case.
that's very true. That's very true. Although I still find it to be a bit specific, but okay, in any case. So these 30 participants, they were asked to board on the bus with their ticket, not their ticket, with their membership card, but it wouldn't have enough balance on it. It wouldn't have enough money. So when they would come and get checked by the bus driver, They would show it to them and they'd be like, oh, the bus driver would be like, there's no money. And they would respond with, all of them were asked to respond the following way: I do not have any money, but I need to get to the following station. And not the following station, the station, the stop that was close by. They said around 2 miles away. So the bus driver couldn't be like, drop the person off here and they could walk to their destination. Or at the same time, it wasn't too ridiculously far. So they tried to get that. So these 30 participants actually boarded buses a total of 1,500 times over a course of a whole year. So they didn't each do it once. They did it many times. And in the study, they point out that Brisbane is, of course, a big enough city where there was no risk of them running into even the same bus driver or the bus drivers recognizing. So pretty much they all went on the bus without money and they were asked, so this is why they call it discretionary favor, because it was up to really the bus driver to see if he wants to find them, ask them to get off, or just let them ride for free. And they found that white participants, so the white testers, they were twice as likely to be allowed to ride the bus for free compared to black people. So 72% of the time, white participants were allowed to continue their journey, and they weren't given a ticket or asked to leave, and whereas compared to 36% of the time for black participants. So there was to double the number of people. And in this baseline scenario, they were all asked to dress kind of casually, all the participants. And as I mentioned, each participant boarded the bus. I'm guessing, if they did over 1,500 trips in a year and there were 30 participants, so they each did what, like 50? They each boarded the.
Don't ask me to do math.
Anyway, so the Indian testers, they were accepted at 51%. So somewhere in the middle, between 36% of the time for black participants.
You were right.
I was right. They're referring to natives, Aboriginal.
No. That was I was right, but no, you were right. 50 each person. I just did the calculation.
All right, thank you for that. And Asian testers, they were treated the same as the white participants. So 70% of the time, they were also allowed to ride the bus for free. Then
really?
Then they wanted to check the impact that perceived socioeconomic status would have, as well as patriotism. So black testers, all the testers, they were asked to also board the bus wearing a business attire. So black testers were granted 85% more free rides when they wore a business suit, and 115% more free rides when they wore a military uniform. So pretty much, if they were dressed as if they were going to some kind of business job, business position, or if they were in military uniform, then the gap between the white and black participants went away. And so black participants enjoyed as many free rides or percentage amount of free rides as did the white participants. They also found no in-group preferences, meaning that black bus drivers or white bus drivers weren't more likely to let black or white participants go for free. They didn't find any major gender differences. And they say that this is important because it counters the argument that maybe the bus drivers saw black people to be more aggressive or these kind of things. So like, if it had to do a lot with aggressiveness and perceived aggressiveness of the participants, then the gender should have played a bigger role. And this last one makes bus drivers look quite good. Acceptance rates were also higher on rainy occasions. So 87% of the time in general, if it was raining, they'll let you ride the bus for free, compared to 62 if it was sunny. So maybe a little tip that people can use. And the researchers pretty much concluded by saying that our results show that white privilege extends to unregulated daily interactions. So this study, I found it quite interesting. I found it interesting in a few ways. I found their methodology to be quite sound and quite interesting. And the fact that it was a social science field experiment was also equally interesting, which is quite rare.
I definitely agree. I think it's fascinating. I like that they did a They did such deep analysis on the like. I loved how they. That's a good trick for testing the social class with uniform and business attire.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. But
And
I
they,
guess the major conclusion that we should draw is that when you ride a bus for free, try to do it in the rain.
yeah,
That's
white, it helps as well. And so, as I said, this was quite a robust study. So they did two other things in a way too. One was that they also got 40 people to look at, to rank basically the pictures of the participants based on whether they thought they were good looking or if they were kind. So they also included these kind of factors into their analysis. And then they also did this, but they only managed to do it to survey 100 bus drivers before the bus driving company told the bus drivers to boycott the researchers, because then they also took photos of the researchers. So this is a separate part of the study. At the end, they showed pictures to the bus drivers of the participants and would be like, hey, do you think, would you give this person a free ride or no if they didn't have money? And in their responses, there was actually slight tilt towards black people. So the bus drivers were like, they were more willing to allow black drivers to ride for free. And the researchers just pointed out that this shows a lot of problems that are out there with kind of self-reporting studies, as it definitely did not, it didn't match the results that they found in the main part of their experiment.
just a question. They asked the bus drivers after they did the thing. Do you remember them?
Yeah, this was at
Ah,
the
all right.
end. This was like separate. So it was separate other bus drivers, not the same bus drivers. So then the researchers at different,
Oh, all right.
yeah, those participants, that was the main part of the study. But then I think probably the researchers themselves, they went around and they were just showed a photo of one of the participants to a bus driver. And I guess they asked them, so would you let this person ride for? I'm surprised they didn't say no for every single one of them, since that's the law. That's what I would have went with. So I'm curious that these people actually, they were like, yeah, this guy or this guy not. But hey, in a way, they have a
It's,
heart, you can say. But of course, it seems like that racism is also playing a big factor.
I understand. Yeah, and I don't think it plays a. That's where I disagree. It doesn't play a big factor. I don't think it's. I don't think you can even say race. It's more like racial pre-assumptions or color pre-assumptions, because they are not. This is an extra thing,
Yeah,
and they seem to be more likely or more willing to go through with this extra thing if it's somebody from their own tribe, whatever
yeah.
that is. So yeah,
Not
well,
even
what I'm very
they say that it didn't make a difference whether it was a white or black, a black driver. But I think, according to what you're saying, it's aligned with that. And the researchers kind of hypothesize that, in their heads they might see white participants as more trustworthy. And they also added one interesting thing that they said. They said it could also be that maybe they imagine that maybe they think that there's a higher chance that that the white participants would argue back with them rather than a black participant. This is just kind of one reasoning they put out there. Of course, they didn't study for this, and they're like, so maybe they were more willing to give free rides to the white passengers.
fear of Karens and their
Yeah.
complaints to manager. Yeah. No, makes sense. What really surprised me was the fact that Asians and white people were they had the same responses, because from what I generally I hear in the news and everything, I've never been to Australia, is that in Australia they have generally people who are anti-immigrant have a negative view of Asians, specifically because of the large number of Asian immigrants from
Mm.
India, from Malaysia, that type of thing. So I am
But I wonder,
surprised, and I didn't know if there is a significant black population I doubt it's as significant as America.
no, in Brisbane specifically, where they carried out this study, they mentioned that there's a 5% of the population is black.
No, it's then. I mean, US. I think it's about 8% are black, 12% mixed and all that.
Really, I thought in
But
the
yeah,
US
okay.
around 14% or 15% are African American.
I think that's with like people mixed and everything. Yeah, you're right. Like I think, I mean, not that everybody's mixed. So I'm just like recently mixed. Yeah, there was a recent inclusion into the other side. Yeah, grandparents.
But yeah, it was this week's study really that shows how combination of appearances and I guess preconceived ideas about the person have in people's head. And but I think Asian, I'm not sure if Asian, maybe they just meant like Asian as in East Asian only, so maybe not an Indian.
I think no. I think yeah, you're right. I think they meant just East Asians, like people from Chinese backgrounds. You know that
And
because they
maybe,
did
I
say
guess,
Indian.
yeah, so maybe they consider them, to be equally honest, maybe in their head as a white passenger and believing, it's like a one-off thing. This doesn't happen to them. I mean, yeah. So
No, and racial stereotypes, for example, for black people is they're lazy, they're blah blah blah. Racial stereotypes for like Chinese people are a bit different. Like they are so hard working. All of them are so hard working and blah blah. So yeah, racial racism even differs depending on who's targeting. So
I remember someone once said like the funniest thing to me. They're like, yeah, and like all when I was going to university in Canada, they're like, yeah, and be careful, all the competition coming from China, they're beating everybody and blah 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 stuff like that. I was like, not in the social sciences. In the social sciences, we're not really in competition
I mean, look.
with people from other countries because language is so important in most of them, and especially later on you go on to do communication and all that. So maybe in some areas it is true there's fierce competition. I mean, they're known for being good students, but in the social sciences, nothing to worry about there.
I mean, they are dominating in majority of, let's say, like classical studies or whatever. They're like medicine, engineering, all that. Yeah, and you're right. Even in certain like social sciences that are more dependent on studies and that type of thing, they are much more prominent. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, the type of social sciences that I think even Europeans aren't doing. Nobody's doing them. So it's just basically it's just like 5 people left in a year in Germany. Yeah,
That's true. Okay, so that's it for this week's study.
fantastic.
Then I wanted to do a small little hot take.
Oh, of course. Go ahead. What's? I mean, I had a preview. You told me what's it about, but I'm interested in the details. So go on, tell everybody what's it about.
So I don't know why I was thinking about this week, but pretty much I think the aviation industry is wrongly maligned in a way, at least when it comes to climate change. And they're not really wrongly maligned. I'm using that right now, but it's more that I think that focusing on the aviation industry in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, it's fine and it should be done to a certain extent, but it's important to put it into context. And that's because the global aviation industry is responsible for 2.5% of CO2 emissions. So even a little bit less than 2.5%. However, if you include other pollutants that they put out, I read somewhere that you can say that it's responsible for up to 5% when it comes to, they wrote, the world climate warming problem. But that's looking at other ways that it warms the planet, I guess maybe in short term, and these things could equally stand true for a bunch of other sectors. So I think it's important to just stick to CO2 emissions now.
Do you know if that includes the production as well? The
No, I don't think
cost.
I don't know. I don't think that's what they meant. But anyway, when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, they're responsible for 2.5% globally. In the US, for instance, they're responsible for apparently only 12% of transportation emissions, and they account for 3% of the nation's total greenhouse gas emissions. And compared to cars, which are road transport is responsible for 74% of transportation emissions in the US. So I think that when you look at these numbers, 2.5% globally, really putting a lot of focus, and there are many people who put a lot of focus on the aviation industry, it's kind of a waste of time. I don't disagree that, hey, you should be trying to limit as much as possible. Do not do wasteful traveling for no reason. But let's say you cut that 2.5 in half. Okay, so then you're talking about 1.2. And then if you keep on focusing on chipping away at this industry's and greenhouse gas emissions, you're not going to go far. You know, you're barely going to make a dent when you look at how much the other sectors are responsible. And here another couple of other figures that I think further back that point. For instance, 80% of aviation emissions are emitted from flights of over 1,500 kilometers. So there aren't really any other practical alternative options for such trips that you can turn to. Airplanes carried 4.3 billion passengers in 2018, but I really wanted to see how many unique passengers there were. So how many people traveled at least once a year? Because of course, we know that a lot of people are serial travelers where some people travel once or twice. So that'll be interesting to see at the proportion of how much certain groups of people are responsible for the aviation industry's emissions. By 2050, they're hoping that net aviation carbon emissions will be half of what they were in 2005. And they're also trying to cut down to improve fuel efficiency by around 1.5% per year. So, I mean, these are kind of modest targets, but I think they are fair targets. They're achievable targets. And anything beyond that, I don't see it being so feasible. I mean, the aviation industry plays a big role in the world. For instance, when it comes to transporting goods, air transport carries only about 0.5% of world trade shipment, but that accounts for 35% of its value. So it kind of points out to such specific cherishable goods and other high value goods that can kind of only be transported by the aviation industry. So really this makes me think that, you know, the aviation industry, in a way, when it comes to climate change, it is wrongly maligned. And no matter how much you focus on this industry, I think there's only so much that can be done realistically. And then you look at all the other sectors, focusing on the other sectors. I mean, to be completely transparent here, I'm vegan myself, and I know that. So I think that when it comes to food, and even not even just switching to non-animal based products, which in general use less water, and for instance, when it comes to cows, they don't have methane emissions associated with them, but also a lot of food is wasted. A third of the world's food is wasted. And then the energy sector, of course, accounts for the bulk of CO2 emissions, of greenhouse gas emissions, around 40%. So targeting the energy sector will be so much more fruitful. You know, if somehow people cut down the amount of, let's say, residential emissions, somehow, like people's daily lives, by half, that would make such a bigger dent than even if you cut the aviation industry by a lot more.
I mean, yeah.
So,
I mean, it's a hot take for sure, because I do think, generally speaking, every industry is the one that is the most, at least in the mainstream media, is the one that you hear the most being attacked by the public, and sometimes like there was a massive issue in the UK over the third runway for Heathrow, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, I generally speaking, I agree with you. And for a long time, I always thought that, first of all, cars and that type of thing are they play a much bigger role in polluting the environment, and they have a bigger impact on environment in terms of like You have to create roads and tunnels and stuff. Relative, like trains, they need to be built. Relatively speaking, an airport does not have as much effect. And the distance it covers, for example, if you want to go from China to Europe, it's much faster with airplane than car. Like it, there is definitely a relative advantage to using it, you know. So I do think, like, it seemed to me always the focus should be on other industries. I do disagree with you that like, if there is political will, they can reduce, like, I don't believe the goals they set for themselves are realistic goals, because they're just if there was political will, they could do probably much more. Like, if they invested in newer technologies as much as they invest in drilling in the sea for gas or whatever. That's one thing. And just generally, I don't know if you watched the documentary produced by Michael Moore, Planet of the Humans. I think that's a fantastic documentary. I highly suggest to everyone to watch that, because I just generally, that's my general view, that I think the environmental issue is largely this is my view. This is not the view endorsed in the documentary. But it's just the population issue. It's just, you know, when it's an overpopulation issue, if we want to maintain a certain quality of life. Otherwise, we either should accept complete destruction of the environment, or, and to be honest, and reduction of our standards of living. Otherwise, I see majority of all other things as just much ado about nothing, really. Just, you know, media talk, bullshit talk, fill in the pages for something. But very interesting. I'll be interested to see if there are any arguments against, like, maybe there is some issues we are not aware of in terms of, I wonder what's the production cost of airplanes and that type of thing.
Yeah, but okay, well, coming back to the population thing, we had this argument last week, and I totally don't think that environmental and climate change issues are a population issue. As I mentioned last week, if we get rid of half of the world's population, if you don't get rid of the right half who are immense,
Thanos.
who are consuming a lot more energy and goods than others, you would barely make a dent. And also, planet's population isn't going to be the projections aren't always on the rise. It's supposed to be leveling and going down. So that in a way is being taken care of itself. And as long as there aren't lifestyle and policy changes that happen, the population part wouldn't make much a difference. Let's say if humans start consuming 5 times more, and you get rid of even 80% of the world's population, you could be using more resources and emitting more greenhouse gas emissions.
No,
But
but no, wait. As I mentioned last week, though, I think there are structural issues. First of all, population is supposed to balance itself out around 10 billion. So it's gonna go up, and then it's gonna come down again, but it's not gonna go lower than what it is now. So that's one thing. Secondly, I think if you have a lower population, then you can have a more effective education system. Then you can control consumption. Then you can actually control the way, maybe even in a slower phase, you can get back the same level of population. But I don't think this fast of a population growth in such a short time, with lack of education and lack of core infrastructure, naturally leads to overconsumption, naturally leads to chaos, leading to war, leading to blah blah, leads to issues that doesn't allow for dealing with climate, because at the moment there is such a large population that needs energy all the time. So yeah, but yeah, I completely see your points as well, though. So, but it's good that we found a bit of an overlap in the airplane industry.
yeah, I mean, I don't think you can have 100 billion people living on the planet. Maybe that will be one too many, or maybe even 20 billion. I think just the population itself, if we don't change other things, it might not make a dent
Sure.
at all. And there are so many examples of different countries where with smaller population, they're not able to achieve the same level of education that a country with a much larger part of population. So I think it's one factor, but it can be overshadowed by other factors easily.
Definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, that's the
And I'm looking.
and I have a funny
Yeah.
story about this, about just how ridiculous it is. This was from like 3 to 4 years ago. I was watching Democracy Now, and there was a scientist. It was around the CUP time, so the conference on climate change, whatever, the yearly thing. And
Or
he was talking about the aviation industry and everything and changing our habits. And he's like, for instance, I had to go, it's a true story, I swear. He's like, I had to go to a conference. He was a British man or American, I believe, British. I had to go to a conference in China and I took the train. He's like, hey, it took me 2 weeks, but I wrote 2 papers, so I made the most of it. I mean, first, that sounds awesome. I don't like taking the plane. And if I was also able to go on a train and focus like that on working, I think that's a good idea. So personally, for me, it would work, and I don't even like boarding the plane. I'd rather take the train most places. So I'm not even like that much into airplanes or love traveling or fly every
oh,
weekend. But it just shows how ridiculous that suggestion was. I mean, it was one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. And at that time, I was thinking, okay, if it's responsible for 50% of greenhouse gas emissions or something astronomical, maybe then you have to make insane, ridiculous changes. But at 2.5%, hey, kudos to activists putting some pressure. So hopefully, the airline industry is supposed to triple the number of people that will be carrying by 2050. So, it's good that there's this kind of pressure, but no matter how much pressure there is, there's only so far that it can go. So the main focus shouldn't be there.
no, yeah, and I find arguments like the one you mentioned so childish. And like the train you traveled on had to use the energy of some sort. Trains are actually, I think, the worst mode of transportation for nature are probably ships, I think, because they cause so much pollution in the sea. But trains are awful as well. The only thing that leads to some people to defending the trains is the train system has already been built. But building, like, they have major maintenance issues. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's just childish, I think.
And just the
But
last
yeah,
thing.
maybe again, sorry.
No, sorry, go ahead.
No, just yeah. Uh, I would be interested. Maybe there are some valid arguments in favor of focusing on the air industry, but at the moment, I don't see any. I think there are, as you said, the food industry, the energy industry, the shipping industry. There's so many
Yeah.
other seem to be more important targets.
And some focus should be there, don't get me wrong, on the aviation
Oh,
industry,
definitely.
but definitely not in the way that it is. And just one other example, like a contemporary example that highlights how it doesn't really make a big of a difference. So at first, when the lockdown started due to the coronavirus pandemic, there were all these talks that, this might be good for the environment and for climate change. But now there have been a few studies and just a few estimates that this will not really make a big dent, especially since industries have re-emerged and all factories are up and running again. But hey, the airline industry is still like, I know my father-in-law who used to travel a lot for work. He hasn't traveled this year, and there are no plans for him to travel in the coming months. So the aviation industry, it still has much fewer flights. Anybody who's been traveling recently who were able to do, they know that airlines are canceling flights all the time because they don't have enough passengers. So if this airline industry, if it really had such a big impact, I think it would make a bigger change for it to be, completely paralyzed to a certain extent this year. But it's not the case.
No, I definitely agree, and they took a big hit because of Corona. Oh yeah, there was. I definitely I definitely say that at least in my city and a couple of places that I've talked to people, you could tell that it was different. The air was different. It got better because there were less cars. You saw I saw so much more birds. I saw so much like the mountains became green near our city, which doesn't usually. But that's just that's anecdotal evidence. That's not a large scale. Like there were studies about increased use of plastic because of the packaging. Increased use of you know like disposable stuff, and not being disposed of correctly, perhaps put in the sea or whatever. uh, so who knows what will be there. The whole corona thing has been like, people tend to jump into a lot of conclusions. I think maybe in 2-3 years or so we understand its full impact, as we see how businesses adjust because of distance working is becoming far more common. And for example, even before corona, I had a lot of friends who hire people in their companies. They hire people whom they have never met, from countries, from different cities. So I wonder, like, people like your father-in-law who had to travel a lot for work, they might not uh, they might be able to do a lot of their work, like how we do our show, basically. So yeah, we'll see the long-term effect. But yeah, I don't think just stopped travels being stopped had a major impact on environment. Although I would say my city's scenery became far more pleasant after corona lockdown.
I mean, the whole world was on a lockdown for quite a while. I mean, there was no traffic out there, and traffic has to do with pollution, really. That's separate from climate change, and I think that can be felt much more quickly. The difference can be felt within a day or two. But again, that's really separate from climate change anyway. But yeah, so I think like activists and people who are trying to make the aviation industry reduce its emissions, I think it's great. It should just be put into perspective that the gains will be at some point will be very marginal. So maybe a good amount of change can be made. People become more conscious, their energy efficiency goes up. But that's why I say that I never really believe when they set these objectives. But these objectives that they've set for the airline industry are so like small. I kind of believe them. I mean, they are achievable. They do make planes more and more fuel efficient every now and then. So increasing the fuel efficiency by 1.5% annually is really not hard.
I'm not familiar with
I mean, I would imagine.
industry to know, but yeah, yeah, I'm really looking forward to our checks from Boeing, Airbus. I'm hoping we get some money off of us defending
Hey, there are many
corporations. Like,
there are
come
many
on.
reasons to attack the airline industry. That's for sure, but not this one. I mean, to a certain extent.
No, there are no reasons to attack the industry. Just send me the check, please, for fuck that. Anyways.
I'm wearing my Max 737.
Next episode, I show up with a "Make Boeing Great Again."
Here, apparently, they sold for the first time. They sold another one since they stopped flying their Max 737. I think they sold one to a new country for the first time, and they're thinking of changing the name. So a little branding
Marketing. Yeah.
fix things. And those were some horrific incidents, those two. And then when you hear the backstory, because I listened to a few podcasts on how quality control has decreased significantly when it comes to aviation industry, and how the aviation industry, because of the level of expertise that they have, they often ask, at least in the US, take part in the regulatory part. So they're kind of like regulating a lot of the time, and that's how they managed to get the 737 approved with such glaring issues that everybody's aware that led to two or three horrific plane crashes.
I think uh, three,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure. To be honest, I think one crash was like the prototype or like the predecessor to Max 747 or whatever. I'm not sure, but I think there was one incident in the US and two outside, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it for my hot take. And I think now we're just left with the feel-good story of the week. As you all know, we like to wrap up with some kind of funny, feel-good, ridiculous story. So, and as Sam has the one for this week. So Sam,
Well,
please.
to be honest, I think we should definitely think of a better name for this segment, because last week we did the Reverend and his sex scandal, and this week this I found this interesting. It's more like a pulp story, like a yellow, like seedy story. It's not a real news story, but I like these type of things sometimes as well. Which I don't know if you heard, but there was a controversial issue with Nancy Pelosi and her hair routine. Did you hear about any of that?
No, not at all. And I've been even watching a little bit of CNN and stuff this week. I didn't see it there either, but I didn't go looking for the story.
To be fair, I do watch a lot of The Hill, which is, by the way, great YouTube channel, and they tend to focus on a lot of negative stuff about the Democratic Party, so came up naturally. But it's a great. I believe there was a video that came out of Nancy Pelosi, and in the video they show her going to a hair salon in San Francisco, getting her hair done, and she's not wearing a mask. Something which she insisted. It became a massive point of contention in the U.S. It's become an issue in the U.S. So she doesn't wear the mask. The video got released, and then she said that she followed the rules and regulations. She went to it was a local hair salon, and it was just hair in there. And I think in the first official response they had, they said that she followed the rules and regulations. But then people who fact checked, they said that at that time apparently San Francisco didn't allow any rules and regulations. Like, they didn't allow any one-to-one meetings between, like, the rules and regulations at the time did not allow that. I'm not 100% sure about that. Then Nancy Pelosi came out and they gave this press conference, and she said, "I do apologize. I apologize for believing the local hair salon and for being set up. This was a setup, and I apologize for being set up, and that's all I have to say." And then the shop owner went on Tucker Carlson on Fox News, and she was like, she set it up with our artist or whatever they're called, and how could I have set her up, and she's being paranoid or whatever. But then the artist, the hairdresser who does Nancy Pelosi's hair, apparently she wasn't an employee of them. She would rent a chair, and she does Nancy Pelosi's hair in there. So it's like she's a contractor. She's not an employee. She's taking legal action against the shop owner, saying that it was a setup. Apparently she arranged it with Nancy Pelosi, and then she called to ask if it's okay, and they said it's okay, but they had a lot of question about Nancy Pelosi and they speak. So it seems actually it was a setup, but such a stupid setup. And Nancy Pelosi is such a hypocrite and such an idiot. I don't understand. Nancy Pelosi is super rich. Her husband is one of the richest people in the state. Just have them come to your house. Most of my friends, a lot of my female friends, they have them come to their house, or they go to their house if they're that desperate to get a hair done or whatever it is.
But,
so
yeah.
Just don't get. It's
What
like,
kind of picture was it taken? Like, it was the picture of what? Of her inside, or?
oh, it's a video. It's a CCTV camera video showing her. I think she's wearing the towel or whatever, but she's not wearing a mask.
Yeah.
It's a non-issue. It's a non-news. It's just so good though. It's interesting.
No, for sure. And honestly, I think based like out of all the people who are in Congress and Senate, she if looks like she might be even one of the wiser ones. But I mean, she's so in the public, so you see these things. But I mean, the other ones do extremely stupid things all the time. But another huge, this one was so you remember the ice cream story from earlier on during the pandemic?
Yeah, oh yeah.
That one was just insanely ridiculous. Everybody was
I
obsessed
mean,
over those fridges, and they're true. Those
this,
two fridges.
I loved it. So look, this is my cat. It was like a fucking drawer. It was a massive drawer with ice creams. This is pistachio with a hint of lavender, and this is like this. This is made from milk of cows that are. I don't know, that are virgin born or so. It's crazy, just so out of touch with. I wouldn't, to be honest. I'm not a big fan. I'm surprised you say that she's one of the wiser. I would say, I don't think she's one of the wiser. I would say she's one of the drunker members of the Congress. She's always a bit drunk, I feel.
But
But yeah,
it's also ridiculous.
she's a great political. Huh?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was. Yeah, I mean, at least from her side and stuff, the way that she's been dealing with Trump, I mean, she's done a better job than Republican men and Democrat men when it comes to opposing Trump and standing her ground, at least from her point
Yeah,
of view
yeah,
and her.
sure. But that's like saying, you know, that's kind of like saying Obama is better than Mitt Romney. It's not saying, it's like saying, and to be honest, there is nobody else in her position as a stronger position except Chuck Schumer, maybe. So, and I don't know. I think her opposition to Trump has been mostly, bullshit, like tearing up their speech. But then it's Jimmy Dore, another YouTube creator, great content. He makes this great point. I think other Glenn Greenwald may make this point too. That they claim he is a Russian pretty much puppet, right? Or he's either a Russian puppet or he's so outrageous, he's so out of bound that he's the most crazy person ever, or blah 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 blah. But then they approve his increased military budget. So it seems to me that everything is just talk.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's obviously all 100% bullshit. It's just that in the optics and in like, and I mean, her competition isn't that good. So I mean, I just meant kind of between them, you can maybe argue that she hasn't been, she hasn't done so
No,
bullshit stuff. But of course, it's all bullshit. And I forgot about that when he gave his State of the Union and she's like ripping his speech, but exactly giving him everything that he wants, which kind of shows just like their problem with Trump is just a problem of appearance, really, and optics, not necessarily most of the policies that he's at least trying to implement.
yeah, I mean, look, he's the guy who said we are gonna go out of Afghanistan, and then he had a meeting with generals and came out and said there is loads of money there, so no, we are not coming out of there's loads of minerals, we're gonna exploit the shit out of them. And he's the guy who in Syria basically says, yeah, we're gonna stay there and take the oil. That's why with the Kurdish in the north of Syria. So yeah, I think their major problem with him is that he tells the truth about their intention.
Yeah.
Not tells the truth in a good way, just tells the truth about how evil they are. So yeah, it's more issue of decorum than substance. So yeah, but I just was one of those funniest stories that again, like the preacher, well, not preacher, the Jerry Falwell Jr. Last week. It was a great story because first you had them attacking Pelosi, then Pelosi responding in such a dramatic way, and then the shop owner coming on Tucker Carlson, and the other one suing the shop owner. Just people betraying the other people left and right. It's just great. I mean, it's a bit muddy, but I enjoy wrestling in the mud sometimes. It's good.
No, that was a funny story. That was a funny story. But yeah, so again, it reminded me we should definitely do our projections. So I guess in a month or two for who we think is gonna win and how, based on which states. I mean, it's just so funny, they're like, oh, the Russians stole the elections for Trump and all that. They're like, there are mechanisms that you see. Then don't you have this electoral college? Did he not get these votes? This is so, 2 + 2 equals
Well,
4.
their main their main argument is that they did a online media campaign that shifted minds of the people.
That's the
Which,
best part. That's
first of all, they
straightforward. But then, like, when they start talking loosely, it grows from out of that and becomes even more ridiculous.
oh yeah. No, it's just even that though. That's part of the claim, which is the most concrete part of the claim, is bullshit because they didn't. They there was $200,000, $300,000 worth of ads bought by Russian people, somebody from Russia, with no clear connection to the Russian government. So it's just ludicrous. The whole thing is ludicrous. And again, the worst part is there was, in case of Iraq at least, or even financial crisis, there was a bit of like, we got it wrong, or there, like, oh, we made a mistake, now we have to report these correctly or whatever. This time, no, they just don't, they're just still going on, no, we were right and we're going to continue with this narrative.
Yep. No, for sure. Just absolutely ridiculous. There was something insanely stupid again this week that they blamed Russians on, but I can't remember what it was.
Oh, I think I know what you mean. Adam Schiff, that warmonger in he connected the Black Lives Matter protest to
Yeah.
Russian.
Yeah.
That was just, yeah, Russians famously for racial equality, as everyone knows,
On CNN. No, I remember the clip. Okay, absolutely ridiculous. All right, any last words, Sam? Anything you want to get off your chest?
Again, make Boeing great again. Send me my check somehow, please. I'll defend you. Whatever you need, I'm there for you if you need.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so that's it for this week again. Thank you everyone for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you liked it. You can find all the information below. You can go to a favorite section or whatever you want to listen to. And we also chop up the videos into smaller sections, and we'll be doing more extra videos as we have more subscribers. So we want to bring, for instance, journalists and other experts to talk about specific issues that we don't really have the time to look into, or really don't have enough to start. For instance, the Mali story, which has been a big one for a few weeks, but we have yet to talk about it here.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it would be good to get, but like, we know about some issues in details, about some issues just in general. So it would be good to get some more concrete experts in few cases, hopefully.
Definitely. All right. So thank you so much. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.